Welcome back to my second video on Swedish gardens. If you're new here, I'm Rachel from Douentza Garden in Ireland, and today we're visiting the Bergianska Trad Garden, otherwise known as the Botanic Gardens in Stockholm. This is a meaty video that will showcase many different plants from around the world, which are grown in heated greenhouses in Sweden. There are enormous water lilies, a fabulous Caudex collection, Australian beauties, South African bulbs and fynbos, Californian flora and more. I'll put timestamps to the various sections in the video description below so you can jump to the plants that particularly interest you. Otherwise, grab a coffee and settle down to enjoy our visit to the Stockholm Botanic Gardens. I'm glad you could join me today, and thank you to everyone who took part in my recent poll to select this video as the one you wanted to see next on my channel. Today we're visiting the Bergianska Trad Garden. The Bergius Botanic Gardens was established by two brothers, Peter Jonas and Bengt Bergius. When they died in the late 18th century, the property was donated to the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. In 1885, the gardens were moved to their present site. The gardens are situated in an inlet to the Baltic Sea, and they are part of Stockholm's National Park. There are many areas to the garden, including wetlands, rockeries, an Italian terrace, orchards, a Japanese pond, the Victoria Pond, and more. We will, however, spend the majority of our time today in the two greenhouses. These are the Victoria House, which contains the giant water lilies, and the Edvard Andersson Conservatory, where a host of interesting plants reside. Well, you know what? Let's start in the Edvard Andersson Conservatory, as it has so many important collections to show us. And for fun, today I'll be letting you know which is my favourite plant in each section, so don't hesitate to jot yours down in the comments below. I'm always interested to know what you're interested in. The Mediterranean Hall is in the central section of the conservatory. It has high vaulted ceilings and includes Italian marble. Bougainvillea and passion flowers climb close to an old olive tree. This room is light and airy and scented and reminds me of so many summer holidays. Of particular interest is this rock area over here, which is topped with a Bolota pseudodictamnus tree. I was astonished to learn that this small, shrubby plant can grow a trunk in an ideal environment. It looks like a bonsai tree here, whereas in my garden it struggled until the wet eventually saw it off. The rockery is clothed in various silver scramblers. Silver or grey foliage is an evolutionary adaptation, helping the plant to reflect sunlight and reduce water loss. Silver foliage is a sure sign that the plant is a sun lover and a warning to check its hardiness before buying. Another attractive tree is this beautiful cistus. I'm surprised to find a familiar garden plant in here, cosseted in the greenhouse. This is a canthus or bear's breeches, and at home we might have difficulty getting rid of it. But I guess in Sweden's harsher climate it's less hardy. It is quite attractive, but I wonder if it's a thug here in the greenhouse as it might be at home. Interestingly, hellebores are also grown under glass here. Here's another gorgeous coastal tree that hails from Albania, Algeria, Italy and other Mediterranean countries. It's called Antilles barbajovis, and this fine specimen is very handsome. I noticed some geraniums. Correctly, of course, they're pelargoniums, and although we associate them with the Mediterranean, it should be noted that they are actually from South Africa. It's quite fitting that they paved the way into the South African room. The South African room presents two different types of vegetation from the Cape region, fynbos and semi-desert flora. Most of the Cape floristic region is covered by a shrubland known as fynbos. It's similar to the flora of the Mediterranean, with shrubs that have small and hard leaves, adapted to withstand the warm and dry summer. Plants such as proteas, restios, geraniums and members of the heath family are common here. A semi-desert region named Karoo extends to the northeast of the Cape. This extremely dry area has a flora with many species capable of storing water in the leaves or stems, known as succulent plants. Among them we come across our first Caudex plant. It's a giant Dioscorea, known as the elephant's foot because of the way its surface cracks with age. This one is dormant at the moment as it has no green vining growth on top. In this room there are also several bulbs in bloom. These are hymanthus, and they are producing flowers on very short, fat stems. I wonder why that is, as mine produce much longer stems at home. And the one that got away is this Amocarus flower, poised to open. It's a bulb in the Amaryllis family, and it will form an impressive ball of flower when it opens fully. It would have been my first time to see it in bloom if I had visited just a few days later. This is the Californian room. The Californian equivalent to the hard-leafed vegetation of the Mediterranean is called chaparral. We have some examples of this type of plant, but the room is dominated by plants from the Californian and Mexican deserts, which have a much drier climate. East of the mountain ranges of California are the Mojave and Sonoran deserts. The latter extends far into Mexico. Both the Mojave and Sonoran deserts have very rich floras. This little mammillaria cactus is one that I grew in a pot in my greenhouse. It gets tiny white flowers. Really eye-catching is this Chilopsis with its beautiful flowers. Normally flowers are not good indicators for plant family, but these ones do look like the flowers of the bean tree. Both are in the Catalpa family, although the Chilopsis is monotypic, being the only species in its genus. And we also have a Caudex plant in here. It's a giant specimen of Bocarnia recurvata, which is a common house plant at home. Over here on the steps is another plant whose flower tells you exactly what it is. This is an aquilegia, a granny's bonnet, the one that seeds around our gardens at home. But this aquilegia grows in moist forests in California. It grows on serpentine soil that's made from rock with specific minerals. So I wonder how difficult it might be to grow. It's a very handsome plant, and the orange colouring isn't something that you see on common or garden aquilegias. Next, we enter the Australian room. The area around Perth in the southwest corner of the Australian continent has a Mediterranean climate. There, heat waves sweep in from the nearby desert areas and bushfires are common. The landscape of southwest Australia is flat and sandy. It's dominated by dense thickets and low eucalyptus forests with few herbaceous plants. Species richness is still huge, with over 8,000 plant species. During the hot period, the vegetation looks dusty and grey from a distance. The leaves are typically small and hard and are protected from evaporation by a thin wax layer, giving the leaves a grey shade. Those of you who watch the horticulturalists on YouTube will note that areas near Melbourne, particularly Mount Macedon in the southeast of the country, also has a Mediterranean climate. In the Australian room, there are many representatives of the area's most important plant families, including eucalypts, acacias, and the characteristic grass tree. How great to see the grass tree species Pressii, the one I grew from seed years ago myself. In the fernery, the air is cool and moist. Plants from the temperate rainforests of Australia and New Zealand grow together with species from South American montane forests. The high humidity favours epiphytes, and the trunks and walls are full of them. The lush greenery consists mostly of various ferns, but flowering plants such as anthuriums and bromeliads are also found here. Now we visit the tropical room, and the first plant to greet us is a giant member of the Gesneriid family. This is Aescynanthus speciosus. Not sure how to pronounce that, guys, but it's from Borneo and it makes one whopping basket specimen. I do hope you'll join me when I get around to making the videos on this year's Borneo plant expedition. Borneo has an incredible biodiversity and I can't wait to share it with you. This room also contains the precursor to our modern day citrus trees. It also holds various Caudex plants. We have already seen some Caudices in the South African and Californian rooms, but here are some impressive specimens from around the world. Through evolution, Caudices plants have developed a novel method of surviving drought. They've developed swollen stems that store water for times of need, and the bigger the better for the dedicated Caudex collector. There are also several Amorphophallus in here. And do you know what? They're easier to film in the greenhouse than they are in the jungles of Borneo. I love the mottled trunks of these plants. The stinky flowers are amazing when open and look like the name suggests. From the ancient Greek amorphous, meaning without form or misshapen, and phallus, meaning penis, this refers to the shape of the prominent spadix the plant produces. Not a real flower at all. Turning a corner, I cannot believe my eyes. I put up a photo of this amazing botanic oddity on my Instagram recently, and it was met with derision. People couldn't understand how this plant is number one on my wish list and a source of incredible excitement to me. So sorry if you're among those who don't get it. Welwitschia mirabilis is one of the wonders of the botanic world. It is a dinosaur of a plant with incredibly complex and duplicated genome, probably developed to adapt and survive the extreme stress of increased aridness and prolonged drought some 86 million years ago. This plant produces cones and a long taproot that helps it find water in the inhospitable Angolan and Namibian deserts where it lives. Plants are thought to live for 1,000 to 2,000 years. And get this, once they develop their true leaves at seedling stage, those are the only 2 leaves the plant will ever produce for its 1,000 to 2,000 year lifespan. Here already you can see how the 2 leaves have torn and are shredded. To be clear, we're looking at just one plant here in this bed. It's just laying its leaves to each side, like some botanical Rapunzel. On that note, it's time to leave the Edward Anderson Conservatory and walk over to the Victoria House. We'll just take a calm moment here to digest the wonders we've just seen and engage with some geese. These guys really get about and seem to be a real pain for the vegetable growing. The gardening students shoo them away periodically, but they keep waddling back. The Victoria House was inaugurated in 1900, and the purpose was, like in many botanic gardens of the time, to cultivate and put on display the fantastic giant water lily, Victoria. The house was built to perfectly accommodate the needs of the giant water lily. Today, this greenhouse is classified as an historic building, and it's unique in its kind, since similar greenhouses in Europe have disappeared over the years for various reasons. The water lilies really are impressive. They're enormous, and I just love the red undersides and the thorny texture when you see them up close. I remember years ago how it was said that these giants could support the weight of a small child. Well, I wonder, have you followed the latest experiments on this? If you've watched this channel for a while, you'll know about Alberto Trinco, an Italian horticulturalist who worked at Douentza briefly and then at the Pisa Botanic Gardens and Kew Gardens in London. I visited Alberto at Kew a few years back and made a very popular series of videos behind the scenes at Kew. When Alberto was working at Kew with the giant Victoria boliviana, they carried out an experiment to see if the lily pad could take the weight of a man. Using a stepladder to get onto the leaf and a plastic lid to evenly disperse his weight, Alberto stood upright on the leaf of this watery giant. So it took over 70 kilograms in weight. Victoria boliviana is the world's largest water lily species. If you check out Alberto's Instagram, An Italian in Hort, you'll see photos of him standing on the lily pad, and they're pinned to the top of his account. I will put a link to Alberto's Instagram in the video description so you can easily check it out. And before we leave the lily house, take a look at this giant aroid and its inflorescence. So now we're nearing the end of this video, and I'd like to end by letting you know my favourite plants from this visit. What I really loved about this Botanic Gardens is that it offered a fresh choice of plants. I saw things here that I hadn't seen before, and that was very refreshing and affected my selection of favourites. First up, from the Mediterranean section, I loved the balota tree with its bonsai form and silver leaves. Secondly, you might think that my choice from Australia is the grass tree, but this time I've gone for something small, the cute little Rhodanthe daisy. From California, it has to be that unusual orange aquilegia that grows on serpentine soil. And from South Africa, the elephant's foot or Dioscorea is hard to beat. From the fernery section, I chose Hupertia, the fir moss. Isn't it gorgeous? And finally, what on earth will I choose from the tropical room? Well, despite this room housing many and varied mature Caudices, I must confess that my heart still belongs to the desert giant Welwitschia. Are you surprised? What were your favourites? Do let me know in the comments down below. So this brings us to the end of this video on the Botanic Gardens of Stockholm. If you liked it, perhaps you'll consider subscribing to the channel. And if you missed my previous video on Swedish gardens, I'll link now to it here, together with my series on behind the scenes at Kew, which I made with Alberto. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye!